He doesn't say my name. The spotlight hits him. The crowd roars. And he thanks the firm. The junior associates, even the catering staff. He describes my design, the soul of a building I bled for over 6 months, as if it were his own divine vision. I am a ghost in a room full of bodies. His eyes, the eyes of my boss and mentor, Marcus Thorne, find me in the crowd. He looks directly at me, but times through times me, his smile as polished as the gold statue in his hand. My own smile is a mask. I hold my breath and clap until my palms sting. No scene, just the quiet, physical pain of my own applause. The next morning, the office is electric. Flowers are arriving by the dozen. Congratulatory bouquets for a victory that isn't his. Marcus's new statue gleams from his corner office, a monument to a lie. Catching the morning sun and blinding anyone who looks too long, I walk to my desk with purpose. My heels clicking on the polished concrete like a metronome, counting down to 0. A junior associate, David, gives me a wide, clueless smile. Incredible speech last night. Huh, Marcus is a legend. I just nod. The mask from last night still firmly in place. A true visionary. I reply, my voice flat. He doesn't notice. They never do. At my desk, I open a new email. My fingers are steady on the keyboard. One attachment, a file named Project Helios Concept Draft 3. The recipient is Chloe, a new intern who wouldn't know a blueprint from a bus schedule. She's sweet, eager, and completely overwhelmed, the perfect carrier. The subject line is a ghost, designed to be ignored, to be lost in the sea of her chaotic inbox. Hey, can you archive this for me? THX. She will never open it. She will do exactly as I ask and file it away. But she will never see the weapon hidden in the metadata, a digital fingerprint that can't be wiped away. Creator Esme Rivers. Last modified 14 months ago. I hit send. It isn't a scream. It isn't a dramatic confrontation. It's a lit match, dropped on a pile of dry paper. And in our office, a whisper is a wildfire. It started 5 years ago. I was nobody. Just a grad student with a portfolio full of impossible buildings. Marcus discovered me at my graduate showcase. He glided through the room, a shark in a tailored suit, shaking hands and offering praise that cost him nothing. Then he stopped at my display. You don't just draw buildings. Esme, he'd said, his voice full of manufactured wonder. A performance for everyone else in the room. You see their soul. He hired me on the spot. And I thought my life was beginning. Year 1 was a blur of coffee and revisions, of learning the Thorne method, which I quickly realized meant doing the actual work while he took the credit. Year 2 was the Solaris Tower. The project was on the verge of collapse. A mess of engineering impossibilities and a design that was both boring and unbuildable. I spent 3 sleepless weeks locked in my apartment, redesigning it from the foundation up. I found the solution, the elegant twist in the structure that made it work. My design saved the failing project, but it was his name that appeared in Time's Architecture Digest asterisk. His face smiling from the glossy page next to Time's My Time's building. Year 4 was the Helios Museum. My blueprints, my all-nighters, my vision, his gold statue. He had a whole narrative built around my silence. He'd find me fixing his mistakes late on a Saturday night. The office dark and empty, except for the glow of my monitor. He'd place a hand on my shoulder, a gesture that was meant to feel paternal, but felt like ownership. Your time is coming. Esme, just be patient. He'd murmur. He called me his secret weapon, his indispensable right hand. The words were meant to sound like praise, but they were cages. The week before the awards, he sat me down in his vast office, the city sparkling below us. He told me that my greatest asset was my invisibility. It allowed me to work without the pressure of the spotlight, he said, his voice smooth as polished marble. Now, I understand. What he meant was that it was his time's greatest asset. The wildfire reached him by lunch. The first sign was the silence. The usual buzz of the design floor died down. Phones stopped ringing. The whispers started at the coffee machine, then spread from desk to desk. Someone had been curious. Someone had opened the file. Someone had checked the properties. I could feel the temperature in the office drop 10 degrees. He didn't look at me. Didn't speak to me. Marcus Thorne never fought his battles in the trenches. He fought them on a stage, under the brightest lights he could find. Late that afternoon, he called a firm-wide meeting. We all gathered in the main conference room. He stood before us, all charm and teeth, leaning casually against the marble table. He started with a joke, then praised the team for the Helios win. His win. Then, the pivot. He unveiled a new initiative, the Blackwood site. The name alone sent a chill through the room. It was a cursed property, a developer's graveyard on the edge of the city, where 3 previous projects had failed, costing the firm millions of dollars and a mountain of public goodwill. It was a career killer. He spoke of the need for a radical new vision, for someone who could think outside the box, someone hungry to prove themselves. Then his eyes finally landed on me. The whole room followed his gaze. And that's why, he said, his voice booming with false magnanimity. I am thrilled to announce that Esme Rivers will be leading this project. He publicly named me. He called it my chance to lead, my time to shine. The room went dead silent. Everyone knew what it was. It wasn't an opportunity. It was a public execution. He was handing me a shovel and telling the whole firm to watch me dig my own grave. My failure was the entire point. The project was designed to be impossible. If I failed, it would be proof that I was just a bitter, untalented subordinate who couldn't handle the pressure. It would invalidate the whisper about the Helios design. My career would be over. So, I decided I would not fail. He gave me a basement office with a flickering fluorescent light, 2 unpaid interns who looked about 16, and a deadline that was a joke. The project was a knot of impossible zoning laws, brutal budget cuts from the board, and terrible press. But they had all made the same mistake. They had all tried to force a skyscraper onto a plot of land that wanted something else. I didn't fight the land. I listened to it. For the first week, I didn't draw a single line. My interns, Leo and Maria, watched me, confused. I spent my days walking the site, studying the sun patterns, the wind currents, the history of the neighborhood. Instead of fighting the site's restrictions, the awkward shape, the protected green space, the height limitations, I made them the centerpiece of the design. I designed a smaller, smarter, radically sustainable structure that worked times with times the landscape, not against it. A living building, woven into the parkland. By using reclaimed materials from the 3 failed projects: twisted steel, shattered glass, broken concrete, I slashed the budget by 40%. The design was elegant, innovative, and undeniable. Marcus controlled the boardroom, the press releases, the entire internal narrative. He would have buried it. So, I bypassed him entirely. I found an influential online architecture blog. One he was too arrogant and old school to read. On a Monday night, using my own laptop from a coffee shop miles away from the office, I sent the renderings, the budget proposal, and a short manifesto, all under my own name. The headline went live on a Tuesday morning Times. Is an unknown architect solving the infamous Blackwood curse times? My name, Esme Rivers, was right there in the first paragraph. By 10 a.m., It was the top story in the design world. The firm's phone began ringing off the hook with calls from city planners, investors, and journalists. He couldn't kill a project the city was already falling in love with. My victory was surgical, but victory made me careless. I thought I had won. I thought it was over. That was my mistake. The budget was the key. To slash it so dramatically, I had to do a deep dive into the site's history, into every dollar ever spent on those failed projects. I needed to know what we had, what we could salvage. Late one night, alone in the office, I went digging, not for creative inspiration, but for financial data. The server room hummed around me in the dark, the sterile light of my screen painting my face. The air was cold, smelling of ozone and dust. I was looking for old inventory manifests, but I stumbled into the finance folders, buried in a subfolder from 7 years ago. In the financials of the very first Blackwood attempt, I found a pattern, invoice, from the same 3 suppliers, over and over again. Titan Steel, Apex Concrete, Horizon Glass. They were on every failed Blackwood project. And as I kept digging, I found them on dozens of other high-budget jobs Marcus had personally managed over the last decade. My heart started to beat a little faster. I pulled up the city's business registry on another screen. I cross-referenced their business licenses. All 3 were shell corporations, registered to the same single post office box in Delaware. The invoices were inflated, some by as much as $200,000 on a single order. The money was being funneled directly out of the firm's accounts before a single beam was ever laid. He wasn't just building projects, he was building a slush fund. The digital trail was faint, designed to be erased. But I followed it. Canceled checks, routing numbers, transfer records hidden in encrypted archives. It took me all night, my eyes burning from the screen, fueled by black coffee and a growing sense of cold dread. Finally, at 4 a.m, I found it. The trail led me to a numbered offshore account in the Cayman Islands, and to one name on the transfer authorizations, Marcus Thorne. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I leaned back in my chair, the air knocked out of my lungs. He hadn't just been stealing my ideas. He was bleeding the company dry. This wasn't about ego or credit anymore. This was a crime. A massive, multi-million-dollar fraud that he had been running for years. The Blackwood project wasn't just a punishment for me. It was another opportunity for him to embezzle funds. And my new, radically low-cost budget had unknowingly threatened his entire operation. His rage wasn't just about me challenging his authority, it was about me accidentally threatening his secret empire. The annual shareholder meeting was Marcus's kingdom. It was held in a grand downtown hotel ballroom, the kind of place with chandeliers that cost more than my apartment. He stood at the podium, a 40-foot screen behind him showing charts of soaring profits built on my stolen work and his calculated fraud. The partners, the investors, the entire board of directors watched him with reverence. He was their king. I was allotted 5 minutes. 5 minutes to present my budget for the Blackwood project. A formality he couldn't avoid now that the project was a public sensation. He introduced me with a tight, dismissive smile. And now, Esme Rivers will walk us through some of the financials for her ambitious little project. The condescension was thick enough to taste. I walked to the podium and plugged in my drive. My hands were perfectly steady. My voice was calm, almost quiet, when I began. I started by talking about the Blackwood budget, just as they expected. My elegant, sustainable design appeared on the screen behind me. A vision of glass and reclaimed wood and green space. I spoke about community integration and sustainable materials. I let them relax. Then, the design dissolved, replaced by a simple spreadsheet. My tone was purely informational, as if I were describing a minor clerical error I'd discovered In my efforts to bring this project under budget, I found a significant inefficiency in our historical supplier costs. I said, pointing to a line item with my laser pointer. A company called Titan Steel has been charging us, on average, 35% above market rate for the last 7 years. A new slide appeared, showing a Titan Steel invoice next to a competitor's quote for the same materials. A murmur went through the room. A partner in the front row coughed. I saw Marcus shift his weight at the side of the stage. I continued, my voice never rising. Slide after slide. Apex Concrete. Horizon Glass. A web of shell companies and inflated invoices, all linked directly to projects. Marcus personally managed. I never said his name. I didn't have to. The data was telling the story. The final slide was a flowchart. A simple, brutal diagram showing over $4 million diverted over 7 years from the firm's accounts, through the shell corporations, and into a single destination. I pointed my laser at a box on the chart representing the total sum. By eliminating these inefficiencies and sourcing our materials ethically, I stated, looking out at the silent, stone-faced board, the Blackwood project is projected to come in under budget by $1.2 million. I paused, letting the silence thicken until it was suffocating. Then I turned my head slightly, just enough to look at Marcus, and delivered the final blow. My voice was still quiet, but it carried across the cavernous room. The question we should be asking is, where did all that money go? Every eye in the room, every single one, turned to Marcus. The spotlight found him again. This time, it burned. Marcus said nothing. His face, once beaming with confidence, was the color of ash. The polished smile was gone, replaced by a slack-jawed look of pure shock. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. 2 members of the board's security detail, men who usually stood invisibly by the doors, quietly flanked him. The chairman of the board stood up and, without looking at Marcus, announced a 10-minute recess. Marcus was escorted from the room without a word. The board announced an internal investigation, which was quickly followed by one from the district attorney's office. The firm imploded with the news. By the next day, Marcus was fired, and his assets were frozen. That afternoon, I was called into the boardroom. The same faces that had looked at me with pity and skepticism now looked at me with a kind of fearful respect. They offered me his job, head of design. I accepted. My first act was to walk down to the basement. Leo and Maria looked up, startled. As I came in, I told them they were being promoted to junior architects, with full salaries and benefits, effective immediately, and back pay for their internship. Maria started crying. Then I found Chloe, the intern I'd used to plant the seed. I promoted her to be my personal assistant, explaining that I valued people who knew how to follow instructions precisely. I moved into the corner office. They'd already removed his things. There was no gold statue, just my sketchbook on the vast, empty desk, and a clear view of the city I was now responsible for helping to build. That night, I stood on my balcony. Looking out at the skyline I now had a hand in shaping. I could see the Solaris Tower, a gleaming spear of light that once represented my complete and total erasure. Now, it was just a building, a beautiful building, but just a part of the landscape. The rage that had fueled me for so long, the burning injustice that had kept me up at night, was gone. It had been replaced by a quiet, steady hum of satisfaction. I realized justice doesn't always come like a wrecking ball, loud and destructive. Sometimes it's a whisper that starts a wildfire. Sometimes it's a spreadsheet that burns an empire to the ground. My silence at that awards gala wasn't weakness or submission. It was observation. It was the time I spent gathering the receipts, collecting the evidence. It was the quiet before the kill. They thought my power was in my hands, in the designs I could draw. They never realized my real power was in my head, in the patterns I could see. They only saw the ghost, the quiet girl in the corner. They never saw the strategist. They never saw the queen taking the king. Tell me about a time you had to fight for what was rightfully yours.